Thank you. Brilliant. So thanks everybody for coming. This is off the back of what was quite a successful webinar we did earlier in the year with the changes to CDS data. My name's Adam Wood. For those of you that don't know me already, I'm also joined by Sam, who's our head of analytics. Just sort of a quick word on us before we sort of go into to detail about what we're here to talk about today. You know, we are a customs consultancy for those of you that don't know us. Between us, we've got about 100 years worth of experience within the team. And we own a platform called Cat360 that analyses HMRC import data, which has been a real sort of game changer in the industry. So we're going to share our screen and highlight a few examples today, but we're not here to demo at all. We're going to do a deep dive into three core areas. All the examples that you see today, they come from real life experiences. But before we sort of go into a great deal, let me just sort of share a quick story with you. So earlier this year, we were in a conversation with an automotive business about reviewing their customs data. They've got a really strong in-house customs team, really, really good people, and everything looked really well managed to them on the surface. It took me personally 18 months sort of to get their customs data from them. And once we'd managed to get the data, we were, we had a really, really good picture very, very quickly. And it took us 18 months to get the data, which I do understand, because when teams are running at 100 miles an hour, the last thing people want to do is somebody from the outside coming in, potentially to tell them there's an issue. So we got the data. The in-house team was really good, as I mentioned. The stuff that was coming in through their hands was really well run, but the stuff coming in around the side, the samples, the one-offs, the fast parcel shipments, that was all a different story. And I'm sure that's something that can probably quite resonate with people that are on the call today. So the business thought they used about 5 customs brokers. The data showed when we actually ran it, they'd got 51 that we're using. And one of those 51 hadn't been claiming preferential duty on any of the entries. So the result was they were actually overpaying £2 million a year. Nobody was picking up. So it was obviously added cost of sales in the supply chain. So it's obviously a staggering number. So now what we're not here to sort of to tell you anything to make you feel uncomfortable. It's quite the opposite, really. The point is that the in-house team was doing a really good job. The problem was at the edges where nobody had the time to look, and really that is what today is all about. So just before we go any further, I just wanted to share a poll with you. So my team will just share a poll in a second. Excellent. Thank you, David. So what we're looking at is what are the biggest issues as a business you are facing with regards to customs imports at the moment. So I'm just going to give everybody a bit of time to answer that. Obviously, if you want to drop that into chat, you can do. Obviously, you don't have to if you don't want to. But we thought we covered quite a lot of the broad brushes here. So I'm just going to give people sort of 30 seconds just to answer that. Yeah, it looks like time is obviously one of the big ones, which is no surprise when we're...
No.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. Well skewed towards time constraints. That's fantastic. Great feedback, actually. Really in line with what we see on a regular basis. So that's really interesting. I'll just give it 10 more seconds, see if there's anybody else still to answer. It looks like there's a few results still coming through. Okay, yeah, perfect. We'll stop that poll now. Thanks for that. That's really interesting. We do get that sort of resounding response quite a lot, really. Teams seem to know what they're doing, but they don't have the time and the resource to do it effectively. So what are we going to cover today? So as I mentioned, we're not here to demo it at all, but what we do want to do is show you what can happen when you overlay analytics on top of the data. But we're also going to give you some practical steps that you can take away and do yourself. Just taking my earlier comments, on mixed experience on the call. We're trying to balance technical versus practical today, which isn't always easy. So we've got some experts on the team waiting to answer questions. So please put them in the chat as we're answering. We'll bookmark those and we'll answer them at the end for you. So the first area that we're going to look at today, we're looking at duty under management. So nobody expects every single declaration to be reviewed within your organization. Some of you will be dealing with hundreds of thousands, some of you with millions. Errors are going to happen, especially when third parties are involved. But what we tend to find is small issues compound over time into big liabilities and exposures. And that raises the question, really. And the question being sort of, while you focus on the big ticket items, what is slowly building in the background? So let's just start with the duty under management concept. Now, this is something we coined in-house, but we've been rolling this out in most of our client conversations for quite a while now. And it's a concept that changes how businesses think about their customs just generally. And we call it duty under management, or DUM. So most businesses we spoke to will know what their duty paid is. It's a line on the P&L. The duty under management is always a bigger number, and it includes duty paid plus duty saved through things like free trade agreements, things like returns goods relief, for example. And then we calculate that across 3 years because that is the HMRC's audit window. Okay, so the critical point about this is that it can be attacked at audit. So duty under management is your total exposure over 3 years. So even the duty that you did not pay is still under management. So it's a simple concept, but it does frame things differently, especially when talking at board level with sort of a CFO. A real example, we were talking to a business where the CFO was just not concerned about customs duty at all. They paid £90,000 per annum. It wasn't material in his mind. And then when we ran the data through our analytical software, the picture was really, really different. And he'd got nearly £3 million worth of duty saved under FTAs. That if those preference claims are wrong, clearly that means that the duty would need to be repaid. But there could also be penalties. To frame that, penalties can be up to £1 for every pound of underpaid duty, so it's substantial. And then on top of that, we've got several £100,000 were incorrectly claimed under returns good relief. So when you calculate the duty under management figure across 3 years, it came out to nearly £9 million, which is obviously slightly different to the £90,000 that the CFO originally thought. So the CFO was really staggered from that, and all of a sudden he went from a customs is not material kind of guy to somebody who gives considerable more attention to his in-house team and gives them a lot more time. And it's really just framed the conversation differently because it's using the sort of language that he uses, which is risk management. A little known fact as well for people who don't know this: if you're trading in a large business, by which it means anything over £200 million, or a group that trades over that, the CFO is usually subject to senior accounting officer rules, which means they have personal liability. And he has to, or she has to, sign a piece of paper saying that they have customs under control. Now, most senior accounting officers don't actually know that customs is part of that. They're becoming more and more aware of it as they're going through post-Brexit audits. But it's a really, really good sort of a way, again, of framing it differently for a CFO. So it's not an isolated case, this example, by the way. We see major businesses all the time with this exact same situation. We've even seen a major retailer that didn't think they were an importer at all, and due to the Incoterms they're using. But when we looked at the data, they'd got something like £19 million worth of duty under management, which is a staggering amount. It's because the broker was using their URI and was using their URI instead of the suppliers. So there are plenty of other examples, but the pattern that we see time and time again is the same, really. So how do you start calculating your own duty under management? So here's a method you can use with your own CDS data. So, you can pull your import data for the last 3 years. You need the duty amounts that are paid, the preference indicators, and the procedure codes. You need to total the duty paid, which is the number that most people know. Then identify all entries where preference was claimed. So total the duty that would have been paid at the full MFN rate. The difference between the MFN duty and the preferential duty you can actually pay is the preference saving. So the saving is at risk if your preference claims are not properly supported. Step 4, you're looking at procedure codes, inward processing, and calculating that into it. So calculate the duty that would have been paid without those reliefs. And then you just need to add it all up. So it's duty paid, preference savings that are risk, special procedure reliefs, and then you multiply it by 3 again in line with HMRC window. So it's a really fiddly exercise because you've got to stitch together data sets and it's very time intensive, but it does give you a powerful and worthwhile figure after if you've done the calculations. So that's your duty under management figure. I promise you it's usually more significant than the figure that the CFO has on his P&L. So this method works, but it is a bit fiddly, as I mentioned. So I'm just going to hand over to Sam to go into a bit more detail. He's going to share his screen and show you how using data enrichment can give you that figure really, really quickly.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So here we've got a quick example in CAT 360. The main dashboard that we have at the top, you can rearrange these screens, but we always say you should stick with duty under management at the top of your display because it gives you that overall figure. So you can see here quite quickly in this screen that we've got £681,000 of demo customs duty paid. However, the actual duty under management is 3 million, which is a significantly larger figure because there is money that's being duty that's being mitigated through special procedures, which CAT will work out from all of the commodity codes that are in here. And then also you've got free trade agreement savings as well. So without having to do any of the calculations, you can automatically calculate your duty under management in the system. And what's particularly useful when you're looking at this is you can filter your duty under management so you don't have to recalculate the figures each time. So if I only wanted to see duty under management where the origin was from China, for example, I can apply China in the filter. If I apply the filters here, there, and then you can see that suddenly we're now looking at the total duty under management of 406,000 because we've only paid 206,000 of duty in Chinese origin goods. We've saved 200k through special procedures, and no surprise to anyone, we've not saved anything through preference. Okay, so that's how we can do duty under management, and I shall stop sharing my screen now, hopefully. How do I do that? There we go.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks a lot. I'm just going to share my screen again. Just give me a second, folks. Excellent, brilliant. So thanks for that. So the next thing we're going to look at, we're looking into broker benchmarking. So again, yeah, there's going to be a poll to share just in a moment. I'm really interested to see how many how many brokers everybody uses. And we always ask our clients this question. We always get varied answers for the people in the team. So it'll be really interesting to see what you say. So I'm just going to change the screen. And David, if you could just share the next poll for me, that'd be fantastic. Okay, so we've kept this quite wide for obvious reasons, but it'd be really interesting to see what the answers are here. Okay, pretty much in line with what we normally hear as a response to that. Actually, that's quite interesting. So yeah, quite a few of you 2 to 5, which is a well-controlled list, I would say. Let's give that another sort of 10-20 seconds. Yeah, okay, so there's an overwhelming theme coming here, isn't there? So we'll just give it another sort of 5 seconds, see if there's any other answers coming through. Yeah, with 50%, 2 to 5. Excellent, Dave, you can stop that now. That's brilliant. So whenever we run the data through CAT 360, we very rarely see under 10. Sometimes it's more, much higher, sort of over 50. I would say it's normally sort of over 20 for larger businesses anyway. So, I mean, remember that automotive business for the opening slides, you know, they thought they had 5, but they actually had 51. And that raises some serious questions from our perspective when we're looking at the data, because if agents are acting on your behalf that you do not know about, you know, sort of how is that being controlled? You know, what are the contractual arrangements there? You know, who's managing the risk? Where does the liability sit if, you know, if things were to go wrong? So just give you a quick example. This is an extreme version, but it's a real one. There's a large manufacturer we worked with who their customs broker had performed so poorly that when HMRC actually came to audit, the situation was so bad. The HMRC are now sitting on their board meetings on a monthly basis. So, think about that and what the ramifications in your business would be if HMR sitting at your board table every month. All of a sudden it's not a customs problem, that's a business problem. And the critical point is clearly, and I'm sure most people on the call know this already, especially those of you who are from the customs world, HMRC does not distinguish between your mistakes and your broker's mistakes. You are the importer and the liability sits squarely with you. So how do you get a handle on this? So, here's just a practical approach. You can start with using by using your own CDS data and some sort of basic governance steps. So first, get a list of every declarant that is acting on your behalf. So your CDS data will show you this, but it won't tell you the name of that broker. So you will have to have another step just to work out who is making declarations on your behalf. But once you've got that list and you've worked that out, you can compare it to the list of brokers that you thought you were using. So if there are any names on there you don't recognize, clearly that's your first red flag. For every declarant on that list, we sort of ask 3 questions really. So it's, are you aware that they're acting on your behalf? If you did not instruct them, then who did? If you are receiving copies of the are you receiving copies of the entries? If you don't know about them, I would say probably not. Is there a letter of representation in place, and do you have a process for reviewing and renewing these? So letters of representation, they're not a one and done exercise, which is often sort of the thought really when we speak to a lot of businesses. Are there appropriate contractual clauses covering your compliance? So your contractor with a broker should set out what you expect in terms of classification accuracy, or things like preference or error rates. The reality is you'd probably struggle to get a broker to take on responsibility for that, but you can ask for the things to be included in the contract. Just a quick word actually while we're talking on contracts. Most broker contracts follow BIFA standard terms, which is the British International Freight Association, or the brokers industry. I'm sure most people know that. So those terms include several options to extend your protection, but very few people fully understand them, I would suggest. They've recently been updated as well to make it a lot more balanced. It's worth checking that you're on the correct version. In practice, brokers are really unlikely, like I've just said, to move away from their standard terms. But what they might do is agree to SLAs, service level agreements. And you can then tie them to something that's measurable, like response times for queries, error rates, that sort of thing. So that's where you start to get a bit more leverage. Because if you've got good visibility, obviously you've got more ammunition than going into contracts and negotiation. So the more agents acting on your behalf, the harder it is to control clearly. Where you are not aware an agent is acting for you, you almost certainly will not be issuing clearance instructions or receiving entry documents. So it's really a kind of a blind spot as far as compliance is concerned. So that gives you sort of a manual snapshot. I'm just going to let Sam share his screen again as well and just show you how we can use data enrichment to sort of get to that sort of same place very, very quickly.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Let me share my screen again. Entire screen. Here we go. Right, and then I click this. There we go. Can we see that? Okay, so this has been particularly fun because we don't want to use real declarant names, and Cat 360 is built up to actually resolve the declarant names. So we've created some random data in here and made it look really extreme. So that's what you would see. But this is a perfect example of if we go back to the dashboard. On here, you can see in our declarant analysis, we've got 25 declarants. So we may have someone who believes that they've only got 10 or 11, but then when you actually go and look into the data, there'll be a lot of outliers in the data. These numbers are pretty extreme in here for all these made up declarants. But as you can see, Cat 360 will give you a full list of every declarant, and you'll also be able to then see the small outliers, which tend to be fast parcel operators at the bottom that you might not see. What we also do is we will give you an anomaly percentage. If your declarant data looked like this in CAT 360, then you're in real problems because these sort of anomaly rates you would not expect to see. We do see them sometimes with fast parcel operators when they've got low volumes, and there is quite a few anomalies on the low volumes. But it really gives you a useful insight into that information. You can also really quickly view all the declarations that any broker has done for you by clicking on it. I know that someone has mentioned in the chat, if you are looking to resolve the names of your declarants, of your brokers, you can convert the EORI into a VAT number and use the VAT checker. Obviously, that's a good way of doing it. And CAT 360's got integrations to be able to do that all automatically. So whenever you load in any new data with a new declarant, it will automatically give you the correct name, which is why it was so difficult to make sure that it showed you all these made-up names on here. Okay, thanks, Adam. Adam, you're on mute.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Sam. Yeah, I was just sharing my screen again. The third area we wanted to cover is preferential duty. So this is a bit of a hot potato subject at the moment. Again, please feel free to sort of ask questions here. We can pick them up at the end when Chris is available to answer anything that's a bit more technical. The pattern we see most often around preference is inconsistent claiming. So some shipments have preference applied, some do not. Even for identical goods coming in from the same origin is often the case. Claiming preference, it's ripe for human error. It's really, really easy for brokers to not have the right preference code in the declaration. 3 root causes. The first I've already mentioned, which is human error. Second, the origin documentation exists, but it's not always in place. And third, there's sometimes an awareness gap between people in the team, and especially when dealing with third parties. For example, procurement might know when the goods are coming in, but that might not always filter down. So the data just exposes wherever the weakest link is. And with CPTPP, which is a bit of a mouthful that nobody can seem to say, it's been enforced since December 2024, and the picture has changed again. So we're just going to sort of focus in on that just quickly. There are new preference routes available that most businesses we speak to haven't fully assessed yet. And it's not just that the rules of origin are different, which may make it easier to claim under one agreement than another. The preferential duty rates themselves can differ between agreements, giving you more or less benefit depending on which one you decide to elect. So it is worth comparing. So just going to give you a worked example. It's a bit of a mouthful, this, so bear with me. And it kind of summarizes why it's a bit of a minefield, really. Take clothing, for example, Chapter 62, Articles of Apparel. Under the Vietnam bilateral FTA, the rule of origin for non-embroidered apparel is quite strict. So the fabric must usually be woven and made up in Vietnam for the finished garment to qualify for Vietnamese origin. So specifically, you either need weaving accompanied by making up or including cutting, or you need making up preceded by printing plus at least 2 proprietary finishing operations. So it's things like scouring or heat setting, for example. And then the value of the unprinted fabric cannot exceed 47.5% of the ex-works price. So sorry if that's a bit technical. I'm just reading out the rule. So stick with me. It's a high bar to hit. And that means many garments made in Vietnam from imported fabric simply cannot meet the rule of origin under the bilateral FTA. So now, if you look at CPTPP, under those rules, it's possible to use over 170 specific types of fabric from a country that isn't even part of the agreement. So you could import certain fabric from, let's say, China, have the apparel made in Vietnam, and still obtain preferential origin. So that's really, really key. So it's not, it's a fundamentally different outcome from this. So goods that could not qualify for the FTA can now qualify under CPTPP. And the preferential rate is better under CPTPP as well. So you get a double benefit. It's an easier rule to meet, and it's a lower rate of duty. But you can see why all of this is a minefield, especially if you're trying to do this manually. So, how do you start to check this for yourself? So here's what you could do with your own CDS data. You could pull your import entries for a given commodity code and origin country. You could look at the preference indicator. Is it the same on every entry, or does it vary? Where has the preference been claimed? Check whether you hold valid proof of origin, for example. If you're claiming preference without documentation to support it, then that's obviously a risk, not a saving. And then for your top 10 import lines by value, check whether other agreements like CPTPP offer a better route other than the FTA. And then you compare the rates, not just the rules. So what we then say is sort of, as the fourth step, is sort of prioritize where to sort of spend your time and where to focus. So that's the manual check. And again, I'll pass you over to Sam. Sam can walk you through how we can sort of automate a lot of that for you.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I'm not going to try and pronounce CTPPTP. Let me just share my screen. Entire screen. There we go. Share. Okay, has that come up? Should have done now. Yeah, there we go. Okay, perfect. So here, as Adam's just alluded to, what we do in Cat 360, you've got all the data there. You can go through all your preference codes and look at the commodity codes and look where preference is available based on origin and based on the acceptance stage, the tax point. We do have a preference code analysis screen that shows you what you can find in your data. So here we will have the total potential savings, and we highlight the fact that this is potential for preference. But what we allow you to do is to quite quickly break down these preference opportunities into different statuses. So first of all, if we go with preference claimed, that's where you've claimed the best preferential rate that's available. So there's no potential saving. You've ticked the box, you've got that one. Perfect. Lower rate available is, as Adam alluded to earlier, where there are you've claimed preference, but there's potentially two opportunities, and the other opportunity is a slightly better rate. Cat will work out what that difference is if you use the other rate and what you could potentially save. Preference available is where there is a preference opportunity that you have not taken. Now, Cat 360 won't know whether you can't prove the origin or the goods are made from different areas. It's purely going off the origin countries and the codes. So it's up to you to take a look at those. And then no opportunity, obviously, don't waste your time. The commodity code or the country, there's no opportunity there for preference, so you can filter those ones out. And then finally, we also will also tag things as zero duty. Let me go back to that. Zero duty. So this is particularly interesting. If the goods don't attract duty and you're also claiming preference on that, then potentially that's wasted effort because there's no duty to be paid on the MFM rate either as well. So Cat will let you do all of this, and then you can filter by various different fields in the with the global filters as well. Okay, thanks, Adam.
Cheers, Sam. Thank you. If you can stop sharing. Excellent. Yeah, thanks everybody. So really just coming to the end, more so now, everything we've covered today really sits in our framework that we use here with our clients, and we call it reduce, reclaim, protect. So it's reducing the cost of sales through customs planning, reclaim and overpaid duty going back up to 3 years, and protecting from compliance risk. So because of the time, we can't go into huge detail on all of these areas, and there's obviously loads of other things we wanted to sort of cover. Customs valuation, for example, what value methods being used, correct additions and deductions being made, classification, obviously special procedures. There's all sorts of things that we wanted to get to. If you did have a feel for anything else you wanted to hear from us in the future, please just drop it in the chat and speak to us sort of separately. But every method we shared with you today, things like calculating duty under management, benchmarking, your brokers, checking preference, it's all stuff that we can start to look at with your own data today if you don't already do it. Just really sort of quickly coming to the end, there's a manual compliance sort of checklist here on the left-hand side, the sorts of things you need to look at if you're doing this manually. And then on the other side, we've got sort of what the our Cat 360 tool has sitting behind it, which is what we call a customs data hub. So when we take your data in using Cat 360, it enriches it first of all with APIs to free trade agreements, currency exchange rates, things like the UK tariff. But there's a whole separate data hub that sits behind it that can run checks against all of these things on the right hand side. So you can see it's quite breathtaking, really, what we can do in sort of 30 to 60 seconds when we've got hold of your data. So not here to pitch, but I did want to finish with one just last slide, and we'll keep this one anonymous because I do know we've got sort of brokers on and other consultants listening into this. So we're going to share another poll now, just saying, look, would you like us to take your data? And if you do, that would be great. I think Sam's just sharing his screen as well to show you what the report looks like.
Sorry. Yeah, I might have jumped in at the wrong point. So this is an example of what we can do with the Customs Data Hub when we do audits. So we're actually enriching this with data from a huge data lake of customs rules and free trade agreements and etc. And we will produce a report that can highlight key areas such as we've got missed DCTS preference on Indian spices here. We've got missed DCTS on Thai fruit concentrates, but it will also flag where you've got things that have been correctly claimed. We'll do some classification reviews in regards to vague goods descriptions that it will automatically identify, duty rate analysis and various other bits of information, and also look at valuation reviews as well. So the data hub will allow you to get a full executive summary report on all the sort of things that you should be looking at, with key findings in regards to things like IP authorizations, lacking methodologies, and various other bits of information. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sam. I'm going to stop sharing. So we're going to get to the Q&A section now. So not 100% sure what has been and hasn't been answered during the chat because I've been talking. So I'm going to share a couple of questions, and my team, you can just tell me if we've already answered that in the chat or not. So we've got a few things in here. So let's just start with this one. This one probably for you, Sam, I think. Would CAT show documented status codes too?
Well, the police are coming to arrest somebody at the moment.
So
make sure I give the right information. So yes, Sylvia, would CAT show document and status codes too? Yes. The report that I just shared, it's part of that that analysis report that comes on our higher tariff. We have a whole section in there where it will flag any codes that have been incorrectly applied or that are missing on the entries. That information is all available in the CDS reports. However, we've also now linked that into our model that contains all the rules for all the CDS codes as well. So you will get a summary in the report on the higher tier on the report that will show you of all the lines that you analyze, where there are document code issues as well. We are going to be building that into the actual product as a dashboard, but right now it sits in the monthly compliance reports that are generated from the data into a report document. I can send you an example of those reports and what document codes it checks afterwards as well.
Thanks, Sam. I've got one here, but they've asked us not to share the name. Can CAT 360 be used during an audit where the audit's already ongoing? So I presume that's a HMRC audit. I'm not sure, Sam, or is that one for you, Chris? Probably
Chris.
for you, Chris, I guess.
Yeah. So I would say absolutely. Obviously, when you get that audit sample, what we always try to do is, having got the sample entries, is then drill into the data to think, where are they going with this? Sometimes HMRC are a bit clearer than others with regards to what they're doing, but absolutely, one of the big advantages of CAT 360 from my prior role in-house is that when you make an amendment or a reclaim or whatever to your data, obviously that doesn't get updated in the HMRC version of the data, but you can store that within CAT, and therefore you've got that audit trail there. So from that perspective, I would say absolutely you could use this as part of that audit because you've got that history there. We all know the headaches when they pick the one entry where you're just missing that one piece of paper because it slipped through the cracks. So having it all in one place makes that life that bit easier. So in answer to that question, yes, I said you could absolutely use this.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I think this one's probably coming your way as well. I'm not sure if this one was answered in the chat or not, but I'm just going to share it. We've got an approved broker list of approximately 20. Some of these subcontract the import clearances out through our POA with cover subcontracted brokers. Do the subcontracted brokers, if I can get my teeth in, need to be on our approved broker list? So, Chris, I think that's more your world, isn't it?
I think, yeah. Personally, from a perspective of risk and compliance, I would say absolutely. At the end of the day, Adam made the point earlier, and we're all moving in this world that ultimately, as the importer, the responsibility lies with you. So if you are aware that a broker is acting on your behalf, then you need to be comfortable that that broker is, acting appropriately. One of the things that we often find when we're trying to audit is that, that long tail of agents. Are you getting the documentation from them? Can you easily get hold of copies of your customs entry? Because you, again, coming back to the previous point we were at the audit, you can guarantee that of the 10, 20, 30 that pick, there'll be one where you don't have it, and then you have the difficulty of chasing it, and that's where the pain is felt. So I would always err on the side of caution and say, yes, if you're aware of them, get them on your approved list.
Thank you, Chris. One that looks like it's coming your way, Sam, so I'm just going to share that one on the screen now. Does it capture freight cost of the customs value?
Sorry, just coming off mute. Does it capture freight cost of the customs value? So yes. So what CAP 360 will do is it will work out where the valuation is inclusive or exclusive of carriage and freight, and be able to present that information back to you. In regards to a dashboard report on freight costs, not currently, but it's on the roadmap for adding to the tool. We're looking to add, obviously the main focus at the moment in the product is around customs compliance, but we're looking to, and I know that freight is part of that, but we're looking to add some further dashboards and visual intelligence regarding things around supply chain and logistics as well. So the customs freight would be part of that as a separate report.
Excellent, thanks. So I think we're just at the end of the Q&A session. So thank you for everybody's time. If that was useful, please do just drop us a note to say you'd like to hear more of these sorts of things, or any sort of areas that we didn't cover today that maybe you wanted to go a bit further into. We're really keen to make these sessions as pertinent as possible, and sometimes what we think you want to hear isn't necessarily what you want to hear. So feedback's always fantastic. As we've already offered, if anybody wants to have a demo of their own data, this by all means, just get in touch, and we can do that in sort of 5-10 minutes and have a really, really powerful session with you, really sort of illuminating session. And if you don't want to speak to us and you just want to click that link that's just come up at the bottom there, you can get a free trial, which is available for 14 days. You can just go in, self on board, put your own data in, have a play around, and there you go. So thanks very much for everybody's time. Really look forward to seeing you at upcoming webinars, and hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thanks everyone.